You better hold on to your nuts and butts, folks, because my 2023 NFL quarterback tiers video is here. I guess another way to put it is you could say these are the tiers in my eyes, and I know that my tears are going to give you some tears in your eyes. You see, puns like that are why my wife left me. Tier 8, rookies. Anthony Richardson. Richardson has all the physical tools to be a dominant player, and watching him on film, I was actually surprised by how great his pocket presence was for somebody who's never played in the NFL. My gut tells me that Big Tony, as I like to call him, is going to be a good NFL player despite his mediocre college production. And I also want him to succeed because the NFL needs more strong-armed, exciting quarterbacks who aren't afraid to throw the fucking ball downfield like a man. There's also the chance that Richardson flames out, but I love that the Colts swung big to find their franchise quarterback and to end their quarterback carousel after Andrew Luck quit on them. CJ Stroud. I don't pretend to be a college football expert, but anytime you have a highly productive Ohio State quarterback coming into the league that gets drafted highly, the red flags immediately go straight up in my mind, and Stroud is the latest edition of that. When I watch him play, I see a guy who really doesn't have any outstanding physical traits and doesn't really scream wow in any way, and while I don't think he's necessarily a terrible prospect, I don't see how he's going to be a great NFL quarterback. This is just my gut. Again, literally, Ohio State has never produced a good NFL quarterback. There has to be something to that. Bryce Young. Young is probably the most underwhelming quarterback pick first overall that I can ever remember. He's even less of a physically impressive player than CJ Stroud, and I understand that physical traits aren't the end-all be-all, but they sure as hell matter a lot when you talk about being successful in the NFL. I would be absolutely stunned if Bryce Young ends up becoming a good NFL quarterback. Not a great one, a good one, and much like his Alabama brethren Tua Tagovailoa, I don't think he's going to be physically capable of holding up to the rigors of a full NFL season, so I think he's going to be injury prone. He has draft bust written all over him. I could be wrong, but guess what? I could be right. Tier 7, too soon to tell. Sam Howell. Washington's newest savior is the second-year quarterback out of UNC who played well in the season finale last year as a rookie. Obviously, there's not a big enough sample size yet to make any conclusions about him one way or the other, and he does have some ability, so it's not as if he's completely talentless. I've always said if you asked a drunk person to draw Baker Mayfield, he would look a lot like Sam Howell, and I kind of see Baker Mayfield, or a poor man's Baker Mayfield, as where Howell is going to end up landing. I mean, do we know for sure he's even going to be better than Taylor Heineke? Jordan Love. Finally, entering year 4, we are going to get to see what Love can do after spending his first 3 years as a backup behind ayahuasca enthusiast Aaron Rodgers. From what I've seen of Love after watching him play is a guy who is pretty good playing within structure most of the time and is capable of making plays out of structure, but that's where he gets into trouble. He doesn't have the elite jaw-dropping physical traits or arm talent to make or try to make some of the throws that he does. If Matt LaFleur can keep him tamed and just run his system with a lot of short, intermediate throws, I think the Packers are going to do very well this year. Just a warning to Packers fans, though, don't expect to have a third straight first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback. Kenny Pickett. Kenny Kittens enters his second year in the NFL after a up-and-down rookie season. Because the Steelers happen to be on so many primetime games for whatever reason, despite being the most boring team in the league, I got to watch a lot of Pickett, and I thought he wasn't quite as bad as his raw stats would suggest. And I do think his connection with George Pickens is a legitimate thing. That will only get better the more experience they have together, but I do question what his ceiling is. My instincts tell me he's going to be a career game manager who maybe tops out with a Pro Bowl appearance or two, but he's not going to be a guy that carries the Steelers to any championships. Brock Purdy. Is Brock Purdy just a flash in the pan, or is he legitimately as good as what we saw in his short stint as a rookie? Now, as I've said before, I would hate being a quarterback for the 49ers with Kyle Shanahan, because every single time I would do something well, Shanahan will always get all the credit for it. We already saw this with Jimmy G when Jimmy G put up great numbers. There's, Shanahan's system. And to an extent, it's true. So with Purdy, we're going to see the same thing. If he continues to be a productive quarterback, it's going to be well because he's in Kyle Shanahan's system. If it turns out that last year is just fluke, which I don't think it was, I do think Purdy does have some legitimate ability in there, then the Niners are fucked because the Trey Lance draft pick and trade is one of the worst moves in NFL history. Desmond Ridder. To me, I feel like Ridder is the most unknown or forgotten about starting quarterback entering the 2023 season. And a large part of that is because the Falcons are by far the most run-heavy team in the league, so there isn't quite as much responsibility on Ridder's shoulders as there would be for a lot of other quarterbacks, especially young quarterbacks. But still, based on what we saw out of him the last couple games last year as a rookie, it was a pretty mixed bag. He's not afraid to make some tight window throws, which makes him fun to watch at times. But I think Atlanta is going to be looking for another quarterback in the draft in 2024. Geno Smith. On the surface, it makes absolutely zero sense to put a guy who is about to enter his 11th NFL season in the too soon to tell category, but as we all know, Geno is not a typical case. Going into last season, he was cemented as one of the biggest draft busts ever, and then out of nowhere, he has this 30 touchdown season where he looked like a legitimate NFL quarterback. I almost was going to put him in the above average category, but I just have to see him do it again before I fully buy in on Geno being good. For real, because I don't think we've ever seen anything like this happen before in NFL history. Was 2022 just a fluke? We're about to find out. Tier 6, scrubs, Justin Fields. I can already hear all the obese, middle-aged Bears fans having heart attacks because I put their crappy quarterback in the category that he belongs in. Justin Fields is one of the worst throwers in the league. He has absolutely zero pocket presence. He takes so many drive-killing sacks. I mean, his pocket presence is literally Jamarcus Russell level terrible. He has an amazing arm, and he's an amazing runner and a great athlete, and he has 3 or 4 plays every game that tricks morons into thinking he's great, and maybe he is great for fantasy football. But guess what? I live in the real world, folks, and in the real world, Justin Fields, statistically, ever since he's entered the league, has been one of the worst quarterbacks in the league, and I fully expect that to continue again in 2023. Daniel Jones. Once again, I can already hear the outcries from New Jersey Giants fans about, oh, how can you say Daniel Jones sucks? Look at his QBR, which, by the way, is heavily slanted towards running quarterbacks, which is about the only thing Jones does well. Simply put, Jones is not a good quarterback. I don't know how many times I have to say this. There is not a single fucking time any opponent has ever gone into a game against the Giants and said, oh my god, we have to play Daniel Jones today. He fucking stinks. He doesn't throw touchdown passes. He doesn't throw for many yards. Brian Daboll's entire offense is designed around taking as much responsibility off of him as possible for a reason. And I know all you Giants fans are going to say, oh, you only hate Jones because you're an Eagles fan. And I'm going to say this, as an Eagles fan, I wish that my team got to face Daniel Jones 17 times a year and 3 times in the postseason because he's dog shit. Mac Jones. Jones is only entering his 3rd year, but here's the thing. When he was coming out of Alabama, Jones was hyped up as the most pro-ready quarterback, and after his solid rookie season, which I still believe he has never been the same mentally ever since that famous Monday night game where he only threw the ball 3 times against Buffalo, the fact that he's getting worse the more he plays in the NFL is not a good sign because physically he's already capped out. He doesn't have a strong arm, he's not a good athlete, he takes too many sacks. There's really nothing he does well except make the occasional wow throw. This is really the make or break year for Jones because he no longer has Matt Patricia and Joe Judge to blame for when he sucks. But I hope he actually does do well because it would help my Brady system quarterback agenda. Baker Mayfield. This one hurts, honestly, because I've been a Mayfield supporter really his entire career when all the people came out and said he sucked after 2019 and when he sucked after 2021. I was one of the last people on Mayfield Island, but unfortunately I have to let that dream go. Mayfield just is not a very good quarterback, which is still puzzling to me after his good rookie season and his very good 2020 season. Now he has the unenviable task of replacing Tom Brady in Tampa Bay, but you know what? Hey, he's got a couple good receivers. Maybe he will finally bounce back and prove people wrong, but unfortunately I doubt it. At the very least, he's an incredible actor as seen in his insurance commercials, so whenever his football career is over, he has a job as a studio analyst lined up right away. Tier 5, average but sexy. There's only one possible candidate for this tier, and you already know who he is, the magical sex god Jimmy Garoppolo. Garoppolo is proof that you can't have everything in life, but you can have almost everything. He has looks, he has money, he has the fame, and he's a respectable performer at his job, but he's not a great quarterback. We all know he has his limitations. He makes a lot of dumb throws unless his first read is defined for him, but he's a good player. So as long as you have a good defense, you can win a lot of games with Jimmy G. Very similar to an Alex Smith, but again, sexier. The problem is that I don't think the Raiders have a very good defense, although they do have offensive weapons like Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs and hard worker Hunter Renfrow, so I do think Jimmy G should have a respectable season again, as long as he can stay healthy, which has been the other biggest thorn in his side. I swear to God, if he gets hurt and that piece of shit Tom Brady comes out of retirement to replace him, I will inject so many marijuanas. Tier 4, average, Jared Goff. Goff had a very respectable 2022 season, but as I've said before in some other videos, his raw stats, while looking above average to elite, become less impressive once you dig a little deeper. His home road splits were historically lopsided. At home last year, he and the entire Lions offense were unbelievably great, while his road numbers and the Lions offense was unbelievably bad. I still think that Goff is who he's always been. He's a guy who is capable of good stretches of play, but he's never going to be a truly elite quarterback who can put a team on his back and carry them to the Super Bowl. Hell, the one Super Bowl he did get to was only because of the worst missed call in the history of the NFL. And then he put up only 3 points against Tom Brady. What the hell, Jared? Ryan Tannehill. For years when Tannehill was in Miami, I always said I never knew whether he was a good quarterback who was held back by terrible situations or whether he was a bad quarterback that was holding his team back. And for a while, it seemed after his first years in Tennessee, when he had amazing numbers and amazing stats, that the former was true, that the Dolphins had been holding back this all-time great, efficient type quarterback. But over the last 2 years, Tannehill has dropped back down to reality. And so again, I wonder, is this guy good or bad? The Titans have tried to replace him each of the last 2 seasons by drafting Malik Willis last year and Will Levis this year. Tannehill's still the best quarterback on the Titans roster, but I have a feeling this is going to be his last year in Nashville. Deshaun Watson. Forgetting the fact that Deshaun Watson is a evil person, let's look at what he's done on the field over the last couple years. In 2021, he literally did not play at all. Last year, he was suspended for most of the season, and then when he did finally play a couple games, he was one of the worst quarterbacks statistically in the league. The last full season he did play was in 2020, where he had great numbers and had a great season individually, but his team went 4-12. Watson has not led a productive winning team since 2019. So the question is he still even good? We don't know. Even before all the bull crap off the field came up, his biggest flaws was always that he took way too many sacks, and that he threw a little bit more interceptions than you'd expect for a quarterback of his stature. He's obviously going to get a chance to prove himself again, and I hope he completely shits his pants and that Dorian Thompson-Robinson becomes the Browns starting quarterback. Russell Wilson. Based off of just 2022 alone, Russell Wilson belongs in the scrubs category because he was one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. The only reason he's not is because of his Hall of Fame caliber track record from his years in Seattle, but that will not save him if he has another bad season again. I do think because he was so successful with Seattle that people don't remember that this guy is undersized and he should not have been a successful NFL quarterback. He is an outlier along with Drew Brees. So maybe he's older, he's not as mobile, his senses aren't as sharp as they once were on the field. Maybe he's just not that good anymore. And for a guy who is so corny, when your play is no longer good enough to justify your corniness, you really don't have a lot of slack and your time is running out. I do think Sean Payton will help him, but I think even if all goes well, the days of MVP caliber Russ, which ironically he's never gotten an MVP vote, are over. And I still can't believe he threw that fucking pass in Super Bowl 49. Jesus Christ. Tier 3, above average. Derek Carr. Carr is either the worst quarterback of all time or the worst good quarterback of all time, and I can't decide which. Every single year, this guy has several games or makes several throws that make me think, oh my god, this is one of the best quarterbacks I've ever seen. And then he'll have these stretches where he looks completely uninvolved or he just looks completely lost. I don't understand it. The rap on Derek for basically his entire career is that if you get pressure on him, he shrinks into his shell. But if you keep him clean in the pocket, he will dice you up. And I think that mostly holds true. This is a guy who had all the physical tools and the arm talent to be a Hall of Fame quarterback, but instead he has to settle for being slightly above average because he is mentally weak and he has crying meltdowns after 3 games every single season. I mean, look, that's great that he cares, but come on, bro, you're the leader of the team. Have some balls. Kirk Cousins. It's pretty scary how similar the reputations and careers of Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr are, and Matthew Stafford too, for that matter, outside of 2021. Cousins is a less physically talented version of Carr. When you look at Cousins, though, there's really no one glaring weakness that he has. He prepares hard, he has an adequate arm, he has good accuracy, and he always puts up great stats, so what's missing? While I do think he sometimes gets a little bit too jittery in the pocket and can play a little bit too conservative, I don't think he's nearly as bad, or not good rather, as his career record would make him out to be. He's just a guy that has crappy luck. Every time you play against Kirk Cousins' team, you know and you just feel like everything's going to be okay. It's the exact opposite of the vibes you get playing against Tom Brady. I don't really know how to explain it, but you just know know it when you see it. Justin Herbert. Herbert is a guy who I would have expected to be in the elite category by now. He's played 3 years, and he's the type of guy that people love making excuses for because he's so physically talented. He might have the greatest arm in the history of the league, and that's not hyperbole. The throws this guy makes are insane. And yet, much like a lot of the other guys in this tier, there is just something missing that stops them from helping their teams win more than they should. Did you know that Justin Herbert last season didn't even average 10 yards per completion? Now, is some of that scheme related with Joe Lombardi? Yes. But this is a guy who has a legendary arm. He should not ever, under any circumstances, be as much of a check down Charlie as he was. And again, I know he was hurt, but this is a guy, Herbert, who is one of the biggest freak athletes the quarterback position has ever seen, and he barely, or at the very least not nearly, uses his athleticism as a runner to threaten defenses nearly enough. His inconsistency is maddening, and he finally makes the playoffs last year. And what does he do? His team blows a 27-point lead. Every year it seems like we're waiting for Herbert to become a top 2 or 3 quarterback in the league, and it just doesn't happen. He's healthy now. There's no more Joe Lombardi. It's time to get shit done and start winning playoff games. No excuses. Lamar Jackson. Every single year, the scouting report on Lamar Jackson has remained the same. He's the greatest running quarterback of all time. He's got a good arm, but if you can force Baltimore into pure passing situations like 3rd and long, then you feel pretty good because his inconsistency as a passer is always going to be there. The last couple years now, he's started to have health problems where he hasn't even finished either of the last 2 seasons. But again, he's now healthy. He's got his new contract, and his team added the best number 2 receiver in the league in Odell Beckham Jr. I do think Lamar Jackson will have his best statistical season this year since his 2019 MVP season. There's really no reason to. He's in the smack dab middle of his prime right now, what should be his peak years. Much like Herbert, it's time to finally get some more playoff wins and playoff success on his resume. Trevor Lawrence. I'm taking a leap of faith here and assuming that Lawrence will continue his improvement that he showed in the second half of 2022. But I'm not as bullish on Lawrence as many other people are. We all know his rookie season was horrible under Urban Meyer, and to be honest, he really wasn't that much better for the first half of last season. But he and the Jaguars finally started to get it going, and they stuck into the playoffs. They had that comeback win, which, by the way, they really had to come back from being down 30 points because Lawrence threw 4 interceptions in the first half. I don't ever think Lawrence will be as good as his generational hype, but I do think he will be a good quarterback because he has all the characteristics that you need in order to be successful, and he's got a good coach now in Doug Peterson. So taking a leap of faith here and saying he's going to continue to improve. And I'm going to do a Stephen A. Smith. I would not be surprised if he regresses and the team regresses, because this is the first time in Lawrence's NFL career where he actually has real expectations entering a season. Let's see how he responds to him. Kyler Murray. The more I think about it, I probably should have put Kyler in the average section, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because I'm a nice guy. Although, as we know, this upcoming season is going to, at best, be shortened for Kyler because he's coming off of a serious leg injury towards the end of last year where he was not very good. Another reason why I guess I put Kyler in the above average category is that with him, the Cardinals have at least been somewhat respectable, but without him, they are absolute dog shit. So I think he's more valuable than he is good, if that makes any sense, and I think that gives him just enough to be in this tier. We all know the questions with him. He is small. He's got great arm talent, but he's very inconsistent. He always gets worse as the season progresses in terms of the months, right? Meaning he wears down, and this was even before his most recent injury, which is the most serious one he's had. He's very talented, as we all know, but I think he's basically going to max out at being a Pro Bowl quarterback, which isn't a bad thing, especially for the Cardinals, but when you're the first overall pick, you're supposed to be a franchise changer. You're supposed to be a dominant player. He's never going to be that. Matthew Stafford. Stafford, whose real first name is John, by the way, has to prove that his 2021 season was not a fluke, because at this point, you look at his career, which is in the latter stages of, that's obviously the clear outlier. I still can't believe this guy won a Super Bowl. I mean, really, he won a Super Bowl in the era of Brady and RODGERS and MAHOMES and BURROW and Allen. Matthew Stafford won a Super Bowl? Wow. But it's not like the guy's a scrub. He obviously has always had a rocket arm. His inconsistency has always been tied to his decision making, which is obviously a big deal for a quarterback. He's able to squeak out a Super Bowl with a super team. I don't know if he's good enough to carry this Rams team without a bunch of other star players. But the thing is, with Stafford, when he's healthy, you know that you're going to get 4,000 plus yards, you're going to get 25 plus touchdowns. And his connection with with Cooper Kupp is unlike any other quarterback receiver connection in the league, possibly outside of Rodgers and Devontae Adams when they were in Green Bay. Similar to Kyler Murray, Stafford is more valuable, I guess, to the Rams than he is good, which is just enough to put him in the above average tier for me. I don't think he will be as bad as he was in his injury-shortened season last year again, so he lands here. Dak Prescott. Prescott is the definition of an above average quarterback who is not elite. I don't know how else to describe it, but this is a guy who he will take you to the very, very edge of success with great plays and smart plays, and then once he gets about 2 millimeters away from finally getting over the hump, he completely shits all over himself, and you go, well, that's why he is who he is. And we saw this last year, specifically in the playoffs, where he has this phenomenal game against the Buccaneers to retire Tom Brady, and then the very next week, with a chance to rewrite his legacy, he completely craps and shits all over himself versus the 49ers to continue the Cowboys' nearly 3-decade-long conference championship game drought. He really is a carbon copy of Tony Romo in every single way. You got the great stats, you got the came into the league without any expectations, so in reality, he should be a feel-good story, but because he plays for the Cowboys, who are the most overexposed franchise in the league, and he doesn't win anything, he's considered a choker, rightfully, and every single time there's a big game or a big moment, or when he's right on the cusp of finally proving the haters wrong, he ends up proving all the doubters and the haters right. That's just who Dak Prescott is, and last year solidified that. I am normally not a guy who really gets into all that choking shit, but Dak Prescott is a choker. I don't know what else to say. He's always been way worse against good teams and bad teams, even more so than what the normal standard is. He's just not that guy. Tua Tagovailoa. Tua is a bit of a conundrum because despite being one of the weakest armed quarterbacks in the league, he throws deeper than anybody else. And despite having a reputation of being a mediocre quarterback, statistically, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league last year. But most importantly, and this is the thing that should concern Dolphins fans the most, is despite him being young, he is one hit away from literally having his career ended due to his repeated concussion problems. So he's extremely difficult to judge. I think that there are about several other quarterbacks who would put up even better numbers than he did last year in the same system if they had Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Mike McDaniel. I mean, he had Mike Gesicki as well last year too before Gesicki left, and Mike McDaniel's schemes. But the concussion issues, obviously, for him are scary in terms of evaluating him and where he ranks for the future. It makes it unpredictable. I put him here because he had the production last year to justify it. And you know what? I respect quarterbacks who throw the ball deep. So I gave him enough of a bump to be in the above average category, but there is no other quarterback in the league right now who is really as good as Tua with as uncertain of a future because it could end on any play. Tier 2, elite, Josh Allen. Allen is one of the 3 or 4 certified best quarterbacks in the league right now, as he has been for the last couple years, really. It's true that he has problems when it comes to throwing interceptions sometimes, but he just produces so many touchdowns every single year that it really doesn't matter. Well, at least until the postseason. Really, there isn't much analysis to be made here, except the only thing holding Allen back from truly cementing himself as a top 2 quarterback in the league, really second behind Mahomes for good, is that he does turn the ball over a tick too much. Last year, he had 13 fumbles and 14 interceptions, and like I alluded to, he's made 1 conference championship game appearance in the last 3 years, which is when he really started to take off as a great player. Considering the Bills' talent and their regular season success in that time, you can consider it underachieving. But the cold hard truth is, for Josh Allen, despite how great he is, he will always be in Mahomes' shadow. Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow has made the Cincinnati Bengals a contender. Sure, he hasn't done it alone, but he has been the key for the turnaround, and that alone makes him elite, because Cincinnati Bengals, for my entire life up until a couple seasons ago, were one of the biggest jokes in the NFL. So Burrow really is that guy. He is a great quarterback. There's no doubt about it. My beef with Joe Burrow has always been that, and this is where perspective comes into play, because the Bengals wouldn't be in these playoff situations without Burrow in the first place, but once you get to these situations like the AFC Championship game last year and the Super Bowl a couple years ago, where you have a chance to get across the finish line, Burrow hasn't done that. And I always bring this up because he has a reputation, which might be deserved in the regular season, as a phenomenal fourth quarter clutch quarterback, but this clutch postseason reputation he has, to me, he has not earned it. If Joe Burrow was the finisher that Bengals fans and his reputation makes him out to be, the Bengals might have won the last 2 Super Bowls, but because he disappeared late in the Super Bowl 56 and the AFC Championship game last year, they lost. Those are the facts. Last 5 drives, Super Bowl 56, no points. Last 2 drives last year, AFC Championship game tied at 20, no points. And I don't want to hear any offensive line excuses. That's always the excuse I hear whenever it's convenient, whenever Burrow doesn't come through in the clutch from Bengals fans. Those segments in those games honestly might be the difference between Burrow being considered the best quarterback in the league and the second or third best quarterback in the league, which he is now. That's how thin the margins are in the NFL. Jalen Hurts. Oh, I can already hear the bitching and complaining from everybody. Oh, this is such a homer pick as you're an Eagles fan. Wow, 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 wow. Let's look at some of the facts here. And I admit I was a Jalen Hurts doubter before last season, but let's look at what happened last year. Hurts led the team to a 14-1 record in 15 games. He had 35 total touchdowns, second MVP voting, second team All-Pro, made the Pro Bowl, and he was also the best player on the fucking field in the Super Bowl, and he would have won the Super Bowl if his defense had given him even one stop defensively in the second half. He led his offense to 35 points in the Super Bowl quote-unquote loss, which is the most points in a loss ever, and by the way, more than Tom Brady ever led any of his offenses to in his 10 Super Bowl appearances. Now, I know that people are going to be like, well, he fumbled the ball. Well, guess what? Even if you take in the fumble, his defense still gave up 31 points on 8 drives, which is inexcusable. And Tom Brady gets called the GOAT for a game where he threw a fucking 80-yard pick 6. The difference is that his defense stepped up in the second half for him, and Hurts didn't. Hurts is 19-3 in his last 22 starts, and he's 19-2 in his last 21 regular season starts. I am putting him here based off of what he did last season and projecting what he can do in the upcoming seasons with his connections with A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and the fact that he is considered one of the hardest workers, and the fact that he just gets better every year. You compare him to where he was as a passer at Alabama to where he is now, the guy just keeps improving every single year. I have no doubt that at this time next year, he will once again be in the elite category of quarterbacks. All you haters can suck my ass. And that includes you, Carl Sheffers and the sod father, Aaron Rodgers. Based solely on 2022, Aaron Rodgers does not belong in the elite category, but because of his track record and the fact that he won MVP in 2020 and 2021, I am going to keep him here, although if he has another lackluster season, much like last year, he will be bumped out. Rodgers is now the NFL's elder statesman and really the last of the old guard with Brady gone. Now that he's a New York Jet, he's invigorated and he's motivated, where I think he was a little bit stale and just content with Green Bay. So I think he's going to have a bounce back season this year. I think Garrett Wilson is going to be his new Devontae Williams. Honestly, with the regular season, Rodgers is going to do what he normally does. I think last year was a bit of an aberration there because he also had a thumb injury that I think was bothering him more than anybody let on. Regular season Aaron Rodgers is obviously one of the 4 or 5 greatest quarterbacks ever, maybe one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks ever, just regular season only. I don't see any reason why that should change as long as he's healthy with the Jets this year. Of course, the biggest question with Rodgers is always the postseason and the fact that despite his legendary arm talent, he has not made the Super Bowl in 12 seasons and counting. It's unfathomable to me. It's because I see this guy make throws every week where I go, you shouldn't be able to make that throw, but he does it, and he's still, for whatever reason, every year, every time he makes the playoffs or whenever it's late in a close game, he's always been shaky in those situations. It's the biggest flaw in his resume, and it's the reason why he's not the greatest quarterback of all time, despite the fact that physically, you look at his arm talent and his mobility, he had all the tools physically to be the greatest quarterback of all time, but he just was not able to come through in the clutch nearly enough. We saw that last year. We saw that versus the Lions in the final game of the season that eliminated Green Bay from making the playoffs. We saw that in the fourth quarter of 2021 in the playoffs versus the 49ers. We saw it in 2020 versus the Buccaneers in the fourth quarter at home in the NFC Championship game. So those are the flaws. The postseason with Rodgers is his biggest flaw. He will take a lot of sacks. Sometimes he gets conservative, but overall, the reason he's in this elite category is because he's normally one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Tier 1, gods, Patrick Mahomes. This is the first time in a long time where I can remember it being pretty much universally accepted that one quarterback is the best quarterback in the league at a given time. Whether it's the eye test, whether it's stats, whether it's accomplishments, individually or team-wise, Mahomes has it all, and he really hasn't even started his prime yet. This is a guy who, as long as he avoids major injury, will finish as one of the 2 best quarterbacks of all time and potentially the greatest quarterback of all time. There's really not much more to say.